Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Mathias, bringing together people, processes, technology, and data to make the world a better place using BS. Dave, to you.
Okay, so great to be here with you today, everyone from all around the country and around the world. And like Sid was saying, I leverage a lot of things. And one of the things in what we do is behavioral science, incorporating in product. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And yeah, I appreciate everyone that voted for this topic, but I do think this is something that I always stress that organizations need to spend more time getting their product managers, their product owners, their product designers more up to speed, and also their organization overall. So if you do want to reach out to me after the presentation at some point, feel free to on any of these platforms. But you can also download the presentation at that bit.ly link and feel free to share with whomever you want and however you want. But before I start today, I want to thank everyone that's organized, supported. I know from being the organizer, one of the organizers of Product Camp Twin Cities up in Minnesota, that it takes a lot of work to put this together. So not just the other presenters, which I thank them for coming here and sharing their knowledge, but also all the sponsors, the volunteers, and the organizers, and certainly you as coming, spending your time. So hope, as Sid was suggesting, to take what you learned today, share with others, because Product Camp's all about that, is trying to connect people and share with others. So with no further ado, let's talk a little about behavioral science and product. So first of all, why behavioral science? And as Sid went to a little bit, was what we think people oftentimes are very rational beings, but we know that we weren't created in offices, and we weren't born, our genes, our DNA were not designed to necessarily be in the environment that we are now. We have all this legacy that, we're afraid of being eaten, right? And so we're at a very different place now in what we're being asked to do. So sometimes a lot of things that we got built in our systems may seem very irrational. And so what behavioral science seeks to do is try to better understand that and leverage that in a way, in some of those systematic irrationalities, as some might say. And so what it's defined as is a branch of science that deals primarily with human action and often seeks to generalize about human behavior in society. And so that's the definition stage of the presentation. But why does it matter to you as a product person? Well, as a product person, certainly everything you do as a product person is about human behavior, right? No matter what products you make, whether it's digital, physical, service type products, what people want, what they need, what their emotions are when they're using your product, how do people make decisions in context? It all matters so much. And so, as a product manager, one of the things we always have to do is we influence without authority, right? And so we're always trying to influence others. We know that is a component. We're really trying to understand customers. The challenge is a lot of times what customers say is actually not what they do and not what they think. And so, understanding customers, behavioral science will help you be better at that. It will help you also be able to tell a better story. And that's certainly an important thing as a product person. Plus, like I say, customer experience is one of the things. I had started a conference up here in the Twin Cities called Customer Focus North. That was all about how do we bring together customer experience, employee experience, and different fields that come together, including behavioral science, because customer experience is such an important, more critical realm for product people. And of course, making better products, right? So we're always trying to create that next app, that next physical product, that next service. So again, behavioral science will help you in that endeavors in that process. So before we get on to some of the concepts that I think you should be aware about when you're thinking about behavioral science, a few starting points. One is behavioral science has science in it for a reason. And therefore, like all science, you need to hypothesize and experiment. So don't just read something and think and try to sell it to your boss and say this is the grand thing and then try to put it into production. That's not how it should go. And so, hypothesize, test, experiment, and, see what works and what doesn't. Certainly, as Sid was alluding to, or even saying, behavioral science, there's a lot of good and a lot of evil that you'll see people using this for. And of course, good and evil it's not black and white, and there's many shades gray, but certainly thinking about how you can use behavioral science for good, and in your customer's eyes, is this for good, is something that you should be constantly thinking about. Additionally, context is such a critical thing when it comes to behavioral science, because One is there's a lot of different, the term cognitive biases, you'll hear reference, we'll use that today. There's a lot of different cognitive biases out there, and a lot of those will interact in different ways. And then they also interact very differently in different situations. So certainly think about the context, and something that just works in one context will not necessarily work in another. So again, needing to experiment and iterate. And last, but certainly not least, it's a great way to leverage up as a product person. So you don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to have a chief behavioral officer to start things out in your organization. You can just start learning this information. There's a lot of great stuff out there. At the end of the presentation, I will give you a lot of places to start your journey if you're looking to get more educated in this area, if this resonates with you. But certainly there are a lot of experts out there, and experts in different areas of behavioral science. It's such a broad field. So again, just stress, take advantage of it, learn and on the shoulder of others, and then just give it a try. So we're going to start out with the one that confirmation bias is just the one that resonates so much to me and so much to others. It's something that we're just all fall victims to, no matter how much we try to alleviate confirmation bias. And what is it? And I'm sure normally I would say in a room presenting, I'd ask, who's heard confirmation bias? And a few hands would pop up. And then we go through that whole, what is this? How people have seen it. Obviously, this is a little different in a virtual format, but we seek out information, we evaluate information, we evaluate our decisions, we have our beliefs, our thoughts, our assumptions. We're seeking out what we already know. We know this happens all the time as we look at how journalism has come and how people are seeking out the things that they like, or the things on social media. These things really take advantage of a lot of the unfortunately, the negative, the confirmation bias that exists for us. But it's also the case as product people. It's how do you take the data comes to you, and are you challenging data more if it's data that goes against your beliefs, and then just sort of like agreeing that, oh yeah, that supports my beliefs, so I'm not going to interrogate the data if it was sampled well, things like that. Again, it's so easy to do, but that's why good experimental design is really important. So an example, of course, as a product person, like I was just saying, is seeking data or design an experiment that more likely supports your view. That's something that just happens in too many organizations I see. So, thinking about how to limit confirmation bias. Well, certainly one way to limit confirmation bias is to put together diverse teams, and diverse teams that are empowered to speak up, diverse teams that are able to really challenge each other and be heard in your organization. In addition, also thinking about good experimental design, and how from the start do you design good experiments to test the information the experiment that you're trying to test, and make sure it's set up well. Those are the two ways that really will help you reduce confirmation bias in many cases as a product person in your organization. Hyperbolic discounting is another concept you'll hear a lot, and some people refer it as to time discounting. And so Sid was talking a little bit about, unfortunately, we're all sort of having the COVID-15, or, it's just unfortunately, food is more accessible. Somebody just emailed me today saying, hey, I'm getting tired of the Zooms, but I really like that I can make a sandwich in 2.5 minutes. And I was like, that's exactly the problem that I'm having. So what is it? It's the cognitive bias where we choose smaller, more immediate rewards rather than larger, later rewards. So yes, we grab that ice cream. We think we justify it in so many ways why we deserve that ice cream right now. And then after the summer, we end up gaining a few kilograms that we didn't expect. Of course, we know that objectively, if we stand back and we say, hey, if you have 20 ice creams over the summer, is that good or bad for you? But on each one, those small things, we value at a much higher level than we probably actually value our health more in the longer term, but we discount it so much oftentimes in our actions. So one of the ways, I've done a lot in financial services over my career. And one of the things, of course, like banks, there's always a lot of signups, and retailers and all these other things to, hey, sign up for a thing. And so you'll sign up for this cheap type of gift that's very valued because that cheap gift is happening. You get it now, right? You get, like, if you sign up now, I get this. But then some people will say, well, what if we try something else? What if we try a higher value future reward? Now, oftentimes people will actually, even though that other reward may be higher value and off in the future, people oftentimes actually value that less, and they'd rather have that free gift now. Now, of course, as a product person, though, you may actually think about, wait a sec, how can I use this in the sense that maybe I want to segment out my customers and I want to look for people that are more likely to save. So maybe I'll use a cheap free gift versus a longer term, larger reward as a way to sort of segment of figuring out which type of account I might have that gift, that sign up gift, because I want certain people to go into this account versus that type of account. So again, thinking of how can you use behavioral science in a way that in your product role, and that's one example in financial services. So quick experiment here we're going to do just in the realm of experiment. So get your chat window open, and so in chat you're going to be asked to give two responses, either A or B, and then the second question will be either C or D. So just getting you prepared, open your chat. So someone asks you which of these two would you rather choose. You get only one, or you don't get both, and you don't get the chance to say, well, I don't want to decide. So choose A or B. So A is a 50% chance to win $1,000, or B is win $500 for sure. Which one of these is a more compelling choice for you? So let's see what the responses are coming in. Let's see a lot of things coming in. And of course, I didn't set this up as a normal question because, so generally speaking, and I'm seeing a lot of B's here. Of course, this could be my confirmation bias coming out, but oftentimes B is the more common response that I hear when I ask this in a room, and generally the experiments will show that. Now C or D is going to be the answer, and same type of rules. Now someone asks you which of these two would you rather choose. C, a 50% chance to lose $1,000. So you have to either pay $1,000 or you pay nothing, or you have a guarantee losing 500 for sure. So you either get C, 50% chance to lose 1,000, or D, lose 500 for sure. What's your response? Okay. C, a lot more C's here. Yes, I see a lot of C's as I'm scrolling through here. So this goes right in line with what I would expect. And again, this is one of those behavioral science concepts is most people will select B, win $500 for sure, over A, to 50% chance to win $1,000. On the other hand, even though we know, like mathematically, you do this 10 times, it's going to come up with the same result, either A or B, along with C or D. C is 50% chance to lose 1,000 is generally chosen over D. So why is this? Why do we do this? Well, one of the concepts out there is losses loom larger than gains. It's called loss aversion. So we see this when we see marketers sending emails to us, like, don't lose out on this, even though they're trying to get you to sign up for it, or you're going to lose out on this being part of this email. I don't know how many times I've gone in and I've not been reading a newsletter that I had signed up for at some point. And finally, when I see that says, don't lose out on this, and even though I know about loss aversion, oftentimes I click on that email because now is the time I need to think about, do I want to sign up? Am I going to be off this newsletter list? Even though there's no cost, there's a cost for me of putting time into it. So I'm really losing my time by just clicking on that email. So again, even though we know about these things, we're still going to sometimes fall victim to these. So, okay. So loss aversion is really powerful concept you're going to notice with your customers. So thinking of how, again, to use this for good, not evil, is really important. The key effect we'll do, and I'm just looking how I am on time. Okay, got a few more minutes, so that's good. A key effect. And this is one I'm sure most people have shopped at Ikea or at least heard of Ikea before. So what is it? So of course we know what Ikea is as a store. It's a big retailer. You have this long line around it. It's got great meatballs and other things at the end in the restaurant. But it's when labor is invested, then it leads to inflated product valuation. So when you think about this, is the photo here is of a bookcase, and I'm sure many of you have put together IKEA furniture before, right? You get the flat box and you get like an Allen wrench or two, and you get some paper directions, right? And so after hopefully 15 minutes or less, although sometimes longer, you have together your IKEA bookcase or whatever it is. I actually have one that's actually similar to this, but a little bit different. And the good thing is like you feel like you actually used your hands to do something, so you feel a little bit better for it, as long as it's not to the level of frustration where you're just spending too long to put something together, but you've invested labor in it. So now I have an inflated product valuation for that bookcase. Now, when you think about this as a product person, in some areas where some companies might be harnessing this is, for example, kids build their own bear, right? So you can buy a teddy bear off the shelf, or right down the road from me is Mall of America, and they have this massive Build-A-Bear workshop where kids go in by, they're just lined up normally. Obviously, we're in COVID. That's not the case now, although it just opened back up. So I'm not sure how that line looks now. But certainly those kids are valuing that bear because they had something to put about, they created that, they put their effort into that. But another way as a product person to think about and how you can leverage something like the Ikea effect potentially is just how you engage people. We know we should engage people early, but there's a strong reason to not only engage people early in what we're doing, but we also want to get those people giving input, putting effort, getting their ideas into what you're doing. And of course, you can't just like dismiss ideas, but you need to not just, sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to involve people early, get their ideas, but then really be dismissive because they're trying to get them involved because they think they'll get bought in. But of course, you have to actually be engaged with them and not just be dismissive. So just going to put that out there because I do see some people thinking, oh yeah, this is a great thing. So I'll get legal involved or get information security involved early. And then whatever they say is sort of poo-pooed. So let's go to, actually one more of these before we'll get into your questions that you may have for me, is choice overload. So in product, there is so many things around choice. And I think choice is something that you should really understand as a product person because it does actually make a really big deal. So choice overload is one of those concepts. And so what is choice overload? Choice overload is consumers being overloaded with just too much choice. And it ends up with inaction or analysis paralysis, no decision. Now, there are some businesses where you're like, Cheesecake Factory, for example, that maybe seems very counterintuitive, where it has tons of choices that are out there versus something like an In-N-Out Burger, right? I know in lots of areas of the country, that's a popular thing where the choices are very limited. So we're apparently going down this food path maybe a little too much. Everyone's going to be hungry at this point. It's lunchtime. But certainly being overloaded with too much choice, being aware of that. So for example, some research that was done here, one of the things that was done is like in a grocery store, is it better to have 6 choices or 40 choices? In this case, experiment was done around jams, and it was, the typical type of display setup. And the idea is like, okay, with 6 jams versus 40 jams, which would people try more, where they'd come to the thing and try more? And secondly, which would lead to more actually purchasing? Because certainly if you try stuff, but then you don't get to a purchase decision, well, then it's very little value for the jam person. And it's also probably lower value for the customer. So it was shown actually that 40 choices led to a greater level of actually trying the jams, but 6 choices led to actually buying the jam. And so certainly, again, and like this isn't like magic where it's always like 6 is the magic number. I don't want to say that. Like, again, context and all these things matter. But sometimes you need to ask yourself, am I giving my consumers enough choice or too much choice or just the right choice? And different consumers are going to have different levels of what that right choice is, and also what that right choice is at a given moment. So choice architecture is something, like I say, as a product person, if I was you and you really, you find this topic very interesting, I think choice architecture is something I would advise you to take a look at. And again, there's a link to some more information in the presentation on that. And I'm looking at the time and I'm out of time for going into priming. So it's part of the slide, so we won't cover priming today. I want to be respectful of time, but there's a lot of behavioral science concepts that are out there. Certainly here's some other ones that I definitely think that you should be aware of, but there's literally hundreds of cognitive biases that exist. But if you're looking to continue learning, here's some online sites. Each of these are linked to areas where you can get some more information. So that's some online forums, some books that you may think about picking up. These are all fantastic books, but there's actually a bunch of other ones that I would recommend too, but here's some starting points. And certainly there's a bunch of podcasts, either ones that are directly oriented towards behavioral science and some that tangentially cover a lot of things in behavioral science. Again, so if you're one of those audiophiles liking your information. And then last but certainly not least is, while we're in COVID right now, we're certainly doing a lot more remote, and that's great. At the same time, there's also a lot of things in community, and Action Design Network is one of different organizations that have communities of behavioral science. But I believe Action Design Network, I see that they have a location in Durham. And so you might want to look and check them out and I don't know if they're doing virtual stuff now or not, but certainly when they're doing stuff in person again, it's definitely worth checking out the Action Design Network locally. Or checking out what other behavioral science groups that may be in your area on Meetup or on Google to get involved in your community, because I do think it's something that you'll benefit a lot from. So like I say, thank you for your time, but a few quick takeaways before leaving. Diverse teams, think about diverse teams. Good experimental design. You want to reduce that confirmation bias. You want to use behavioral science for good for your customers. Stand on the shoulders of others and learn, but also start today, start hypothesizing, experimenting, and applying. Don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis. There's so many things to choose from. So grab something and go. And again, there's a link to the presentation. And again, if you want to reach out to me, there you can do so. And I am available for any questions.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate all your wisdom on this. I do have a question. First off, if you have a question, please, if you would, submit it in the chat window. Dave and I will kind of look at that and pipe in if you've got something. In the meantime, what are the most exciting things that this has, behavioral science has influenced in new products?
Mm-hmm. You're asking what has in new products, or what are you saying?
What do you think is the most innovative use of behavioral science in products that you've seen?
So certainly I think, and I don't want to steal too much thunder from our next speaker, because I know Danny Reale is one of the co-founders of that organization, and I've done a lot in the insurance industry space. And so one of the startups that really behavioral science first has done a lot is Lemonade, and even just how I think they're going to IPO this year. If they haven't announced it, they're at least expected to. And certainly Lemonade Insurance, I think, and just how they've rethought the concept of insurance and what it means to customers. And they've integrated behavioral science, customer experience, and a very traditional business. I think that is extremely interesting. And, it's almost like you think of like AI first organizations or customer experience first. Also, I would look at Lemonade as an organization that also would at least have a behavioral science first type of mantra.
David Quimby asked, how do you distinguish between tacit knowledge and confirmation bias?
Yeah, that's a great question. And David is someone up here. And so I think that is, I mean, again, like I would say, context matters a lot, right? So how we're using the context. And I'm not sure. So David, do you want to go off mute for a sec? Are you able to go off mute?
I don't think we're going to have time for that.
Okay. Because I wanted to get clarification on that question a little bit, and maybe I can reach back out to David on that.
Okay, Jessica Coates asked, what's your favorite user research method? Surveys, usability studies, or something else?
So just like I'm very technology agnostic, I am extremely user research agnostic. I really, I think of research agnostic in the sense of, the right tool for the right job. And I think the challenge is with confirmation bias, and this is the challenge anytime you're even going with consultants, is like, try to understand if they have their hammer, they're always going to see, find nails, right? And so I think, thinking about certainly some cases, surveys are great, right? Cost effective. They may be very good in a certain case. Certain times observational research makes sense. Oftentimes, though, I think one is to say, generally speaking, there isn't, one thing that's going to answer everything, like involve multiple forms of research, user research together to really see. Otherwise, you're going to oftentimes, be more likely go down that rabbit hole. And then two, again, like, really have people that are well-versed in different user research, whether it's, you might be going with a certain consultant, for example, and they're really good at this, but make sure that your organization's versed, at least you have people in the room that are very knowledgeable in those other research methods that can make sure that, what you're trying to discover is going to be best captured in that, because oftentimes people will often, again, it's human nature. It's that confirmation bias where you fall victim to.
Thank you, David. I very much appreciate your time and willingness to share. And you've keyed off our next speaker just absolutely perfectly.